There's a story from my childhood I've carried for years, a story I never really understood until much later. Sometimes, it haunts me. Other times, it almost feels like a forgotten dream. But every time I think about it, I get chills. I must have been 3 or 4 years old. The memory is blurry, just a night, a storm of shouting, my nanny's arms pulling me close, telling me softly to go to sleep. There was a crash, angry voices echoing through the house, my parents fighting. I remember being scared, but the next thing I knew, I was drifting off to sleep, the world growing quiet around me. As I grew older, I would sometimes ask my mother about that night. What really happened? Why do I remember it with a feeling of dread? No one wanted to talk about it, at least, not at first. But over the years, I started to piece together the truth. And what I learned was far more chilling than I could have imagined. It was the early 1980s. My father was a man with money and charm, a dangerous combination, especially in a small, close-knit town. Women seemed drawn to him, and he never resisted. Most nights, he'd stumble home long after midnight, reeking of alcohol. My mother, loyal and quiet, raised 4 children in that house. I think her patience was stronger than anyone realized, until, finally, it wasn't. On that night, the world outside was pitch black. The houses stood far apart, the only sound the distant croak of frogs and the river's murmur beyond the trees. There were no streetlights then, just darkness pressing in on every window. My father came home drunk, as usual. But this time, my mother was waiting for him. She confronted him, her voice shaking with anger and heartbreak. The fight erupted, shouts, sobbing, things breaking. My mother, exhausted, desperate, destroyed, was pushed past her limit. And in that moment, something inside her broke. She left the house immediately. The nanny watched in terror as my mother disappeared, but I don't think anyone expected her to come back. Barely noticed in the shadows, no one stopped her. She walked down the path, the wet grass brushing against her feet, the night air heavy with the scent of the river. She wandered toward the jetty, the old wooden one where the fishing boats slept. The world was silent, empty, except for the darkness in her mind. She stood at the edge, staring down into the black water, her thoughts swirling. She just wanted it all to end. That's the last memory my mother had. That's when, according to my nanny, something strange happened. She came back, and the nanny saw my mother's body stiffen. Her eyes looked empty. Inside the house, my father was slumped at the table, oblivious to what had just happened. My mother stepped inside, and something else stepped in with her. What happened next? My mother, who was never strong, never violent, suddenly attacked my father. She grabbed him and threw him to the ground as if he weighed nothing. She struck him again and again, her voice now deep and thunderous, not her own. She shouted words that sent chills down everyone's spine.
You ungrateful child. I gave you a good wife, and you would throw her away? Unworthy son. Disobedient child.
My father, in that moment, realized with terror whose voice it was, not his wife's, but his own father's, my grandfather's, who had died years before. My father broke, falling to his knees, begging for forgiveness, sobbing like a child. He called out,
Forgive me, Father! Forgive me, please!
She continued to strike him several times until my father wept like a child. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the rage left my mother's body. She collapsed, confused and trembling, with no memory of what had happened. My father, broken and sobbing, crawled away from her, barely able to speak. After that night, everything changed. He never spoke about it. He stayed home often, and tried, finally, to be the husband and father we all needed. Years later, my father had long passed and my mother was growing old. I'd sometimes visit my grandfather's grave. I'd wonder, did he really come back that night? Did he save my mother from herself and our family from ruin? I'll never really know what happened. But whenever I stand at that grave, I always whisper, "Thank you, Granddad." Because, somehow, I know he heard us that night. And maybe, just maybe, he still does.